So, good morning, everyone. Good morning, sir. Today, we will be discussing all about the soil moisture constant. So, soil moisture constant refers to the different levels or conditions of water that remain in the soil under circumstances. This constants helps us understand how water is held in the soil and how much of that water is available for plant use. So, sa soil science, ang soil moisture kay dili siya ga-remain nga the same kay na may mga factors nga ga-effect ana sa ilang pagbago. For example, ang rainfall, ang irrigation, evaporation, o plant absorption. So because of this, scientists identified certain stable levels of soil water which are called soil moisture constants. So there are several important soil moisture constant. The first is the permanent wilting point. So this is the stage when the soil moisture becomes too low for plants to absorb. Tas ang mga plants na magbigin na sila nga mga laya o dili na sila maka-recover tungod sa tungod sa environment nila. And the next is the in between permanent wilting point and field capacity. So kani diri nga point kay kanang murag padulungay na siya nga pahurutay ang soil moisture. And the third one is the field capacity. This occurs after the excess water has drained away due to gravity and the soil still holds enough water, and this is considered the ideal moisture condition for plant growth. So, ang capacity mo ni siya ang kanang ideal for plant growth nga soil kay dili siya dagan og soil ay dili high iyang moisture content o dili pud low yung moisture content. So the last one is the saturation capacity. This is the condition when all the spaces between soil particles are completely filled with water. At this stage, the soil cannot hold any more water. So dari nga stage kay kanang gakapuno na gid ang soil sa water. Mao nang ang uban plants kay kanang masubraan sila og tubig tas mga matay ra gyapon. Soil moisture constant are very important in agriculture and soil management because they help farmers understand when to irrigate crops and how much water the soil can hold for plant use.
So next is soil and water relationship. Industrial waste, oil spill, agricultural runoff, and untreated sewage all contaminate water bodies, harming ecosystem and posing risk to human health. So what is the soil and water relationship? It is refers to how water interacts with soil particles and pores. So there are three main parts of water found in soil. First is gravitational water. Water that drains downward due to gravity. It is usually drains quickly and is not very useful for plant. Second is capillary water. Water held in a small pores by capillary pores. This is the main source of water for plant because root can absorb it. Last is hygroscopic water. Water that is tightly attached to soil particles. Plants cannot use this water because it is held too strongly. So, lastly, the soil and water relationship explain how water enters, stays, and moves in the soil. Soil holds water in its pores, and plants use the water that is available between field capacity and the permanent wilting points.
Let's move on to the soil moisture constant. So, what do you mean by soil moisture constant? It is a study of water and its availability. Water available in the soil at the standard crop growth stage is called as a soil moisture constant. So, here are related things to soil moisture constant. So first is the maximum water holding capacity. So what do you mean by maximum water holding capacity? So this is the maximum amount of water the soil can hold after heavy rain or irrigations. At this point, the soil is already full of water. Next is the moisture equivalent. So what do you mean by moisture equivalent? This is refers the amount of water that soil can keep even after some water is removed by force. It shows how much water stays inside the small pores of the soil. Next is the field capacity. Field capacity is the amount of water left in the soil after excess water has drained away. This is considered as the best condition for plant growth. Next is the permanent wilting point. So, this is the point where plant cannot get enough water from the soil anymore, causing them to wilt and they cannot recover. Next is the ultimate wilting point. This is the stage where plants are completely dry and cannot survive anymore because there is no available water left. Next is the available soil moisture. This is the amount of water in the soil that plants can actually use for their growth. Next is the hygroscopic coefficients. This refers to the very small amount of particle that sticks tightly to the soils and plant cannot use this water. So soil moisture constant, it's also help us understand how water is stored in the soil and how plants use that water to grow.
Maximum water holding capacity. So what is maximum water holding capacity? When all the pores of the soil are filled with water, the soil is said to be under saturation capacity of maximum water holding capacity. So to make it simple, this means the soil cannot hold any more water because all the spaces between the soil particles are already full of water. If more water is added, it will drain or flow away. Second, the tension of the water at saturation capacity is almost zero, and it is equal to free water surface. To make it simple and easy to understand, it is the tension of the water is almost zero, which means the water is not held tightly by the soil. It is like free water, so it can move or drain easily.
So now, let's talk about moisture equivalent. So moisture equivalent is the amount of water that soil can hold after it is fully soaked and then spun in the centrifuge with a force 1,000 times stronger than gravity for about 30 minutes. The remaining water in the soil is measured as a percentage based on oven dry soil, and this percentage is called the moisture equivalent. In medium textured soil like loam, the field's capacity and moisture equivalent are almost the same, and in the sandy soils, the field's capacity is higher than the moisture equivalent because sandy soil cannot hold water very well. And in very clayey soils, the field's capacity is usually lower than the moisture equivalent because clay holds water in very small pores called capillary or microcapillary pores.
Field capacity. So what is field capacity? The moisture held by soil against gravitational force is called as field capacity. To make it easier to understand, field capacity is the water that soils holds after extra water drains away. Second, at field capacity, the large soil pores are filled with air. The micropores are filled with water and any further drainage is low. To make it easier to understand, at field capacity, large soil pores contains air. Small pores contains water, and the remaining water drains very slowly. Third is the field capacity is the upper limit of water availability to plants. To make it easier to understand, field capacity is the maximum amount of water in soil that plants can easily use.
Permanent wilting point was proposed by Briggs and Chance in 1912. The soil moisture content at which plant can no longer obtain enough moisture to meet transpiration requirements and remain wilted unless the water is added to the soil. This means that plants have used up almost all available water in the soil. At this point, plants can pull out enough water from the soil. They can't meet their water needs, and they will wilt and won't recover unless water added. Next is, it is the lower limit of available soil moisture to the plant. This means that permanent wilting point is like the last drop of water plants can use. Below this point, soil still has water but plants can't access it. Water is too tightly bound to soil particles, and plant growth stops and it will wilt. Lastly is soil moisture tension at permanent wilting point is about 15 atmosphere or 15 bars. This means that permanent wilting point, the soil holds water super tightly. 15 atmosphere is a measure of how strongly soil holds water, and 15 bars is the same thing, just have a different unit. For example, negative equals dry condition. This means that plants can pull water out of this tension.
Ultimate wilting point and available soil moisture. First, let's talk about ultimate wilting point. Ultimate wilting point is the stage where a plant will completely and cannot recover even if water is added. This happens because the soil holds the remaining water too tightly for the plant roots to absorb. At this point, the soil moisture tension is about 60 bars, which means the water is strongly held by the soil particle.
Hygroscopic coefficient. It refers to the small amount of water that remains in the soil after it has been air dried. At this stage, most of the soil pores are already filled with air, and water is held very tightly by the soil, which means plants cannot absorb or use it. The amount of hygroscopic water also depends on the type of soil. For example, clay soil can hold more hygroscopic water than sandy soil because clay has finer particles and more colloids. These particles attract and hold water more strongly. Because the water is strongly attached to the soil particles, it can only move in the form of vapor and not as liquid water. Therefore, hygroscopic water is considered unavailable for plant growth.
Next is available soil moisture. Available soil moisture refers to the amount of the water in the soil that plant can use for growth. This water is found between field capacity and permanent wilting points. We can compute the available soil moisture using the formula. Available soil moisture is equal to field capacity minus permanent wilting. For example, if the field capacity is 35% and the permanent wilting point is 15%, we subtract them. Available soil moisture is equal to 35% minus 15% is equal to 20%. This means 20% of the soil water is available for plant growth. Understanding the ultimate wilting point and available soil moisture is important because it helps farmers and scientists know how much water plants can use and when irrigation is needed.
Now let's talk about the factors that affect available water in the soil and why they are related to soil moisture constants. These factors influence how much water the soil can hold at field capacity and how much water remains at the permanent wilting point. So first factor is the soil texture. So soil texture refers to the proportion of sand, silt, and clay in the soil. For example, sandy soil has large particles and large spaces between them. Because of this, water drains quickly and sandy soil has low field capacity. This means it cannot hold much water for plants. Clay soil, on the other hand, has very small particles and tiny pores. It can hold a large amount of water, so it has high field capacity. However, much of this water is held very tightly, increasing the permanent wilting point. As a result, not all the water in clay soil is available to plants. Loam soil, which is a balanced mixture of sand, silt, and clay, usually has the best available water capacity because it holds enough water while still allowing proper drainage. Next one here is the soil structure, which refers to how soil particles are arranged or grouped together. For example, granular structure, which is common in healthy topsoil, allows good water infiltration and storage. This improves the soil's ability to hold water at field capacity while still making it accessible to plant roots. In contrast, massive or poorly structured soil may limit water movement and reduce the amount of water available to plants. The next one is organic matter. It also plays a very important role. Organic matter comes from decomposed plants and animals, such as compost or humus. Soil rich in organic matter is usually dark and crumbly. It improves soil structure and increases the soil's ability to hold water. For example, when compost is added to garden soil, it increases field capacity without significantly increasing the permanent wilting point. This means more water becomes available for plant use. Next is the soil compaction. Is another factor that affects available water. Compaction occurs when soil particles are pressed tightly together, often due to heavy machinery or repeated stepping on the soil. When soil is compacted, pore spaces are reduced. This limits water infiltration and root growth. Even if water is present, plant roots may struggle to access it. Therefore, compaction can reduce the effective available water capacity of the soil. Next is the soluble salts. In soil, it can also affect water availability. For example, soils in coastal areas or poorly drained irrigated lands may contain high amount of dissolved salts. Even if the soils contain water, high salinity makes it harder for plants to absorb that water. In this case, the permanent wilting point increases because plants need more energy to take up water. As a result, the available water decreases. Now, lastly is the soil depth. It influences how much water can be stored in the root zone. Deep soils allow roots to grow further down and access more stored water. For example, valley soils are often deep and can hold a large amount of water. In contrast, shallow soils over bedrock have limited space to store water, so plants may dry out more quickly. Even if the soil texture is good, shallow soil reduces total available water.
Summary: soil moisture constant define how water is stored and available in soil. So, soil moisture constant are the specific levels that determine how soil store water and how much of that water is actually available for the plant to use. And for plant available, water lies between field capacity and permanent wilting point. So, it is defined as the specific amount of moisture held in the soil between its fully capacity and the point where it becomes too dry for plants to survive. So, and soil texture, structure, and organic matters control water retention. The physical characteristics of soil are the texture, structure, and organic matter. These are the primary factors that control how well it can retain the water. So understanding all of these constant help us improve irrigation and crop growth.